Harley riders hate talking about this, but we're doing it anyway. The brand survived wars, recessions, and even being owned by a bowling ball company. What nearly killed them? Their own engines. Some Harley motors built the brand's reputation for bulletproof reliability. These 12 did the opposite. Every Harley owner has a story. If you've ever ridden one of these, we want to hear it in the comments. Now let's talk about Harley's greatest hits in the worst possible way. Number 12, the Knucklehead. This gets romanticized today as the bike that saved Harley during the Depression, and sure, it was a leap forward from the Flathead. But if you actually had to ride one back then, or worse, keep it running, you'd know why mechanics dreaded seeing these roll into the shop. The valves ran directly in the cylinder, casting with no guides, which meant constant wear and compression loss every time you rebuilt the top end. Oil circulation was a joke. The system couldn't move enough oil where it needed to go, so the motor ran hot, the valves wore out faster, and you'd be tearing into it again before you hit 10,000 miles. The flywheels and bottom end were weak, prone to cracking under stress. And when they let go, you weren't limping home. You were done. These motors displaced 61 to 74 cubic inches, depending on the year, with the bigger models pushing around 36 to 40 horsepower. Not much grunt by any standard, and the compression ratio hovered around 6 to 1 or 7 to 1. Stroke versions got more torque through leverage, but reliability? Forget it. Oil leaks were constant, seeping from the top end and rocker areas. Valve springs snapped and left metal fragments scattered in the valve train. Overheating showed up as scorched components and discolored exhausts. Collectors today will pay stupid money for an original Knucklehead, and there's talk of modern replicas blending the heritage look with actual working technology. But back in the day, this engine built Harley's reputation for one thing: maintenance headaches. Next is the Twin Cam 110. You dropped 70 grand on a CVO with the Twin Cam 110, expecting bulletproof performance from 110 cubic inches of Milwaukee's finest. What you got was a motor that ate lifters for breakfast because someone spec'd valve springs so stiff the lifter rollers couldn't survive. Around 25,000 miles, maybe 30 if you were lucky, the rollers would pit and the cam lobes would score. Head gaskets blew from the heat this thing generated, mixing coolant with oil and turning your oil tank into a science experiment. The cam plate had issues, the oil pump had weaknesses, the crank developed runout, pick your failure mode. And this wasn't isolated to a few unlucky owners. Failure rates clustered around lifters specifically because of that valve spring pressure, a design choice that prioritized performance over longevity. When you're selling a bike as the premium option, the one that costs more than some cars, failures at 25,000 miles aren't acceptable. 1,801 cubic centimeters pushing 95 horsepower and up to 114 foot-pounds of torque at a 9.3 to 1 compression ratio. With mods, you could hit 115 horses, but that didn't stop the motor from cooking itself or the lifters from disintegrating. The 110 ran hotter than the smaller 96 or 103 ever did, and that heat accelerated every other problem. Oil leaks became common as seals couldn't handle the temperatures. Owners watched their premium bikes weep oil and overheat in traffic, while Harley dealers quoted them thousands for repairs that shouldn't have been necessary. Harley settled with some owners quietly. No big recall, just acknowledgement that their flagship motor couldn't make it to 50,000 miles without major surgery. Older settlements from 2010 covered overheating and oil leaks, admitting the problems without fixing the root cause for everyone. Forums today are full of people installing lighter valve springs and hoping that's enough. The aftermarket figured out what Harley should have known from the start, that reduced pressure valve springs could extend the motor's life, but by then the damage to the 110's reputation was done. The 110 was supposed to be the answer for riders who wanted more than the 96 or 103. Instead, it became proof that bigger isn't always better when the engineering can't back it up. Coming in at number 10, the Revolution engine from the V-Rod. This one's controversial because it wasn't bad in the traditional Harley way. It didn't leak oil from every gasket or eat cam tensioners for breakfast. The problem? It wasn't a Harley. Liquid-cooled dual overhead cams, co-developed with Porsche, the Revolution was a technical showcase that completely missed the point of why people buy Harleys. You lost the air-cooled simplicity, the iconic potato-potato rumble, and the ability to wrench on your own bike in the garage. Instead, you got a motor that required dealer-only maintenance, expensive valve adjustments, and specialized tools most home mechanics didn't own. Displacement ranged from 1130cc up to 1250 in later models. Power was genuinely impressive for a Harley, 115 to 122 horsepower at 8,500 to 9,000 RPM, with 74 to 86 foot-pounds of torque screaming at 7,000 RPM. On paper, this thing ripped. In practice, it was a maintenance nightmare. Coolant reservoirs overflowed when the system overheated. Cam chain tensioners wore out and left metallic debris in the oil. Electrical gremlins popped up randomly, dashboard lights flickering like a Christmas tree. Harley killed it in 2017, and there's been rumors of a 2025 revival with 150 horsepower. We'll see. For now, the original Revolution remains the answer to a question nobody asked. Number 9. The Revolution X. Harley tried to crack the beginner market with the Street 500 and 750, bikes built in India with liquid-cooled motors that were supposed to bring new riders into the brand. Instead, they scared them off. The throttle had this nasty habit of lagging when you twisted it, then leaping forward like someone kicked the bike from behind. Unpredictable power delivery on a beginner bike is a great way to put someone in the ditch or make them never touch a motorcycle again. Add cheap components that felt budget from day one, and you've got a bike that damaged Harley's image more than it expanded their customer base. The 494cc Street 500 made 29 horsepower, while the 749cc Street 750 pushed 58 horses at 8,000 RPM. Torque ranged from 29.5 to 43.5 foot-pounds, with an 11-to-1 compression ratio and a 6-speed transmission that should have been smooth but wasn't. The throttle issues weren't just annoying, they triggered limp mode, dashboard warnings, and sudden power cuts that left riders stranded or limping to the shoulder. Harley killed the line in 2020, and the used market reflects it. Values are in the basement because nobody wants a beginner bike that actively fights you. No major recalls since discontinuation, just forums full of people installing aftermarket ECUs trying to fix what Harley should have gotten right from the factory. The Revolution X proved that going cheap to chase new customers only works if the bike doesn't suck. At number 8, the early Panhead. This is the motor that created the stereotype. You know the one, Harley's leak oil. Park one of these anywhere, and you'd leave a calling card, a fresh oil spot marking your territory like a badly trained dog. The aluminum rocker covers and pushrod tubes couldn't handle thermal expansion. The metal expanding and contracting as the engine heated and cooled, which meant seals never stayed sealed. Oil wept constantly from the top end, dripping down the motor and pooling under the bike. Every parking spot, every garage floor, every gas station marked. Harley riders learned to joke about it because what else were you going to do? The aftermarket made a fortune selling better seals and gaskets. But the damage to Harley's reputation was done. Displacement was 61 or 74 cubic inches, with the 74 CI models running a 3.44-inch bore and 4-inch stroke. Compression ratio sat at 7-to-1, making 50 to 55 horsepower through a 4-speed transmission. Top speed hovered around 100 miles per hour when the motor wasn't too busy burning oil or marking its territory. The mismatch between aluminum heads and iron components guaranteed leaks, and no amount of tightening or gasket swapping fixed it permanently. Collectors today pay premium prices for restored panheads, and there's chatter about a 2025 revival blending vintage looks with motors that don't require a drip pan. Until then, the early panhead remains the reason an entire generation thinks oil leaks are just part of the Harley ownership experience. Coming in at number 7, Twin Cam 88. Harley finally replaced the Evo with the Twin Cam 88. This was supposed to be the future, more power, better reliability, everything riders had been asking for. Early buyers found out the hard way that the rear cam bearing had other plans. You're doing 60 on the highway when it lets go, no warning, no gradual noise building over time, just immediate grinding followed by total engine destruction. Oil pressure hits zero. Metal debris tears through the cam chest, and suddenly your 5,000-mile Harley is dead on the side of the road. The ball-bearing design couldn't handle the directional load from the cam chain, and when it failed, it took the entire motor with it. Harley moved fast once they realized what was happening. warning letters in 2001, a 5-year 50,000-mile warranty extension, and a quiet bearing redesign mid-year 2000. If you bought in the first production run, tough luck. The 1,450 cubic centimeter motor made 55 to 62 horsepower and 70 to 75 foot-pounds of torque at 3,500 RPM with an 8.8 to 9 to 1 compression ratio. None of it mattered when your oil filter looked like a glitter bomb went off inside it. Harley fixed the issue within a year, but launching your flagship motor with a defect that destroys engines without warning. That's not how you earn trust, even if you make it right eventually. Number 6. The Evolution Big Twin. This motor gets praised as the engine that saved Harley in the 80s. And yeah, it was a massive improvement over the Shovelhead disaster that came before it. But saved doesn't mean perfect. The cylinder-base gaskets leaked constantly because Harley's machining tolerances were garbage. The mating surfaces between the cylinders and the crankcase weren't flat or smooth enough to seal properly, so oil seeped out from the junction, dripping down the primary and leaving spots under the bike. You'd fix it, ride for a while, then watch the rear left corner start bubbling and oozing again when the motor got hot. Mechanics made a living off Evo-based gasket jobs, remachining the cylinder bases flat and installing aftermarket multi-layer steel or Cometic gaskets that actually worked. 1340 cubic centimeters displacement, 82 cubic inches, with bore and stroke around 3.5 inches by 4.25. Compression ranged from 8.5 to 10 to 1 depending on the year and tune, making anywhere from 67 to 91 horsepower with torque around 80 to 95 foot-pounds. Peak power hit at 5,800 RPM on hot setups. The motor itself was solid when it wasn't leaking, but those base gasket issues were expensive and repetitive. Forums today still reference the Evo as a benchmark for older Harleys. And enthusiast restorations always budget for fixing the leaks with proper aftermarket gaskets. The Evo saved Harley, but it also kept a lot of mechanics busy patching up what the factory couldn't get right from the start. 5th on the list, the Ironhead Sportster. If you rode one of these for more than an hour, you knew. The vibration was unreal. Rigid mounted straight to the frame with nothing to dampen it, the motor shook everything. Your hands, your feet, your teeth. Mirrors turned into useless blurs at highway speeds. Bolts rattled loose. After a long ride, you'd get off the bike and your hands would still be tingling, numb from the constant buzz. Then there was the oil consumption. 1 quart every 1,500 miles wasn't a leak. It was normal. Harley said so. The front exhaust pipe would be caked in thick black soot from burning oil, blue smoke trailing out the back, and you'd be checking your oil level constantly because running it dry meant grenading the motor. 883 to 1,000 cubic centimeters, 61 cubic inches, with a 3-inch bore and 3.812-inch stroke on the 83. Compression ratio sat at 9 to 1, making 50 to 57 horsepower at 5,800 RPM and 50 to 55 foot-pounds of torque. On paper, decent numbers for a smaller Harley. In reality, the vibration and oil burning made long rides miserable. Ironhead discussions today focus on vintage restorations, with no new issues because these bikes are museum pieces now. There's chatter about reviving the classic Sportster with modern fixes for the vibration and oil problems, which tells you everything about how bad the originals were. The Ironhead was iconic, sure, but riding one daily meant accepting that comfort and reliability weren't part of the package. Number 4. The AMF era Shovelhead. This is where Harley almost died. When AMF bought Harley in 1969, they treated it like any other manufacturing line. Cut costs, push volume, who cares about quality? The Shovelhead under AMF ownership became a joke. Every gasket leaked oil. The electrical system was a mess of intermittent failures and corroded connections. Carburetors were mismatched and poorly tuned. Transmissions had issues. It wasn't one problem, it was systemic collapse. Park a Shovelhead, and you'd leave an oil stain. Ride it, and you'd deal with random electrical gremlins, rough idling, and the constant fear that something else was about to break. This era nearly destroyed Harley's reputation permanently, and it took a management buyout in 1981 to even start fixing the damage. 1,200 to 1,340 cubic centimeters, 74 to 80 cubic inches depending on the year, with a 3.5-inch bore and 4.25 stroke on the bigger models. Compression ratio ranged from 8 to 8.5 to 1, making 60 to 75 horsepower and 80 to 90 foot-pounds of torque through a 4-speed transmission. The specs don't matter when the bike won't stay running or leaks oil from every seal. Quality control was non-existent, tolerances were loose, and fasteners came from the factory barely tight. AMF-era shovelheads are discussed today in historical contexts, with videos speculating about revivals and collectors debating whether the bikes are worth restoring. The answer depends on how much you enjoy chasing oil leaks and rewiring electrical systems that should have worked from day one. Third, the Milwaukee-Eight Generation 1. Harley's newest motor at the time, supposed to be the cleanest, smoothest, most reliable V-twin they'd ever built. Then owners started noticing problems. Oil sumping, where the scavenging system couldn't pull oil back to the tank properly, leaving it pooling in the crankcase. You'd check your oil tank and find it low despite no external leaks. The crankcase was full of oil it shouldn't have, getting churned into foam by the flywheels. Foamy oil doesn't lubricate properly, which led to overheating, potential bearing damage, and cylinders running hotter than they should. Black smoke poured from the exhaust as the motor burned oil it was drowning in. Harley fixed it in 2020 with a redesigned oil pump, but if you bought a 17 to 19 model, you got the beta test. 107 or 114 cubic inches, 1750 or 1870 cc, with a 3.937-inch bore and 4.375 stroke on the 107. Compression ratio hit 10 to 1, making 81 to 86 horsepower at the rear wheel and 110 to 120 foot-pounds of torque. Good numbers that didn't matter when your oil system couldn't do its one job. Forums still talk about sumping on early Milwaukee-Eights, recommending the 2020 pump upgrade for anyone stuck with the first-gen motor. High-mileage bikes show it worse. The Milwaukee-Eight was Harley's big leap forward, but launching it with an oil pump that couldn't scavenge properly? That's a quality control failure on a motor that should have been bulletproof from day one. Second, the twin-cam 96 and 103. Harley riders don't talk about if the compensator will fail. They talk about when. The spring-loaded compensator in the primary case was supposed to smooth out power pulses between the engine and transmission. Instead, it self-destructed, usually somewhere between 30 and 50,000 miles. You'd hear grinding or rattling from the primary during operation, clunking when you started the bike, banging when you shut it off. Open the primary, and you'd find broken spring fragments, metal debris, and gouges on the inner case from the clutch wobbling around. The shrapnel contaminated the primary oil and damaged the primary drive, turning a compensator failure into a multi-component repair that cost thousands. 96 cubic inches at 1584 cc, or 103 at 1690. The motors made 75 to 85 horsepower and 90 to 100 foot-pounds of torque, around 3,500 to 4,000 RPM. Compression ratios sat at 9.2 to 1 for the 96 and 9.6 for the 103, running through 6-speed transmissions in later years. None of that stopped the compensator from grenading itself with mechanical regularity. Aftermarket companies made fortunes selling Screamin' Eagle replacements and upgraded compensators that actually lasted. No recalls. Just the acknowledgement in forums and service bays that this was a known, widespread issue Harley never officially addressed. The twin-cam 96 and 103 were solid motors if you swapped the compensator before it exploded. If you didn't, you were paying for someone else's engineering mistake. And the absolute worst, the early twin-cam 88. Harley knew hydraulic tensioners worked. They'd been proven for decades across the industry, but hydraulic cost more, so they went with spring-loaded plastic tensioner shoes instead, saved about $23 per engine. This wasn't a defect that slipped through. This was a conscious decision. The plastic wore out, usually around 20 to 30,000 miles, shredding into fragments that clogged the oil pump and starved the entire motor of oil. Sudden, total engine destruction. No rebuilding it, no fixing it, just a dead motor and a repair bill in the thousands. Riders experienced it as increased noise from the cam chest, then grinding, then nothing as the engine seized. When the class action lawsuit hit, it came out that Harley allegedly knew about the defect and went with the cheap option anyway. 1450 cc, 88 cubic inches, 3.75 bore, and 4-inch stroke. 55 to 68 horsepower, 82 to 86 foot-pounds at 3,500 RPM, 8.8 to 9 to 1 compression. Meaningless when plastic debris clogs your oil pump and turns your motor into scrap. The lawsuit alleged consumer fraud. Harley knew and sold the bikes anyway, prioritizing cost savings over reliability. Open a cam cover on a failed 88 and you'd find shredded tensioner shoes, plastic chunks in the oil filter, and a motor that died because someone decided $23 was worth more than your engine. Harley never admitted fault publicly, but the settlement and the switch to hydraulic tensioners in later models said enough. The early twin-cam 88 is the poster child for what happens when cost-cutting trumps engineering. So there is your list. 12 engines, decades of problems, and enough oil leaks to mark every parking lot in America. If you found this video interesting, hit that like button and subscribe for more content like this. And if you're shopping for a used Harley, now you know which engines to avoid, unless you enjoy spending more time at the dealer than on the road.